When a scuba diver gets to a certain pressure, the water around him is so pressurized that the gas in their lungs dissolve into their blood and tissue. Bear with me because we're going to explain to you like you are 5. If they decide they want to stay down longer than that, they can get something that's called the bends. The bends is a sickness that happens with the rapid depressurization after being down at a specific depth for a certain amount of time. Basically, with science, your blood turns into a carbonated soda, sort of. Saturation diving is a whole other monster that you have to be a complete insane person to do. But the money's good. Saturation divers make about $45,000 a month. Saturation divers are professional deep-sea divers who descend to depths of about 500 feet, which is 152 meters. They do this to service equipment on offshore oil rigs or undersea pipelines. But unlike most commercial divers who do a few hours of work underwater and return to the surface, saturation divers spend up to 28 days on a single job, living in a cramped, high-pressure chamber where they eat and sleep between shifts. So, my favorite part of saturation diving, which I feel like they need more than $45,000 monthly just because of this. So, basically a business said, hey, decompression of a person takes about 5 days to decompress from a day's work for my company. So the business is basically saying, okay, we aren't about to pay somebody for doing that kind of work, which is nothing, aka decompressing so they don't fucking die. So company A is like, hey, let's not bring them up at all. And boom, that's how saturation diving was born. On a normal day, saturation diving is a clean, well-oiled machine. The month will flow smoothly. For 52 days straight, divers wake up in the company of 5 other men in a metal tube, 20 feet long and 7 feet in diameter, tucked deep inside a ship in the Gulf of Mexico. They get their eggs in the morning, read the briefing for the day, and listen to a disembodied voice tell them that it's time to put on a rubber suit and get to work. Life in the tube was built around going through these same steps day after day after day, while trying not to think about the fact that any unintended breach in this temporary metal home would mean a fast, agonizing death.
That readout, it's always been out. There's no adjustment on the thing. It's just two blocks on the. What the f is that? Okay, blow yourselves down. Blow yourselves down in the valve. Blow yourselves down. What the f is that? Yeah, you got a leak. Shut yourselves down. Shut it down! Blow yourselves down! Blow down! Now! Blow down! Shut your valves off! Shut all your valves off! Shut your valves off! Shut your valves off! Isolate your valves! Shut your valves off! Now, shut your valves! No idea, blow yourselves down! Blow yourselves down! Okay, that's a good one. You okay? Yeah, keep blowing down. Okay, use your emergency blowdown. What was that? Okay, I'll stop any blowdown. Stand by 1. Dive control, Rog.
Typically, it's an up and down process, but the Byford Dolphin was going to have its own chapter in the OSHA handbook. The Byford Dolphin was the name of a semi-submersible drilling rig. Its main drilling area was around the UK, Denmark, and the Norwegian sections of the sea. While drilling in the fake gas field in the Norwegian sector of the North Sea, 4 divers were in the diving chamber system on the rig's deck that was connected to a trunk, which is a short passage to what they call the diving bell. The divers were Edwin Arthur Coward, who was a British man, 35 years old, Roy P., another British man, 38, Bjorn, Norwegian, age 29, Trullis, Norwegian, 34, and were assisted by 2 dive tenders, William Cramond and Martin Sanders. The 4 divers were returning from a dive and exiting the diving bell into their compressed living chambers. The chambers consisted of Chamber 1, in which Edwin and Roy were resting, and Chamber 2, where Bjorn and Trullis were entering after work. Chamber 2 was connected to the diving bell by a trunk, which the bell would attach to and be secured by a clamp run by the 2 diving tenders, William and Martin. Despite being experienced in this procedure, Cramond supposedly made a fatal error. In a normal situation, the pressure within all of these chambers, the trunk and the diving bell, they must be kept in perfect balance. This ensures that the diving bell can be connected and disconnected from the chamber safely. The diving tenders are in charge of this procedure and must follow certain protocols. First, the diving bell door is closed and secured. Second, the pressure in the diving bell is increased to help seal its doors. Third, Chamber 1 must be closed off from the trunk. Fourth, the trunk that connects the diving bell and the chamber is depressurized to a pressure of 1 atmosphere. Finally, the clamp is released, allowing the diving bell to set free from the chambers. While the chamber door was being closed, Cramond suddenly released the diving bell clamp. The trunk was now open to the environment in the chamber, which had a huge pressure difference, and the result was an explosive decompression. 4 divers were exposed to a pressure gradient far too extreme for the human body to withstand, resulting in their immediate and violent deaths. The air rushing out of the trunk forced the diving bell from its position, striking the tenders, killing one and severely injuring the other. Although forensic reports say their deaths were near instant, it was definitely not painless. Medical reports didn't specify which divers suffered what, and for good reason. Because of the intense pressure differences, the sudden and intense explosive decompression had caused 3 of the 4 divers' blood to flash boil. The 4th diver was severely mutilated and dismembered after the rushing air caused by the decompression force ripped his entire body partially through a doorway only 24 inches long, severing various body parts and even launching vital organs as far as 30 feet away. The explosion was so strong and sudden that preliminary investigations noted that the 4th diver was mangled so precisely that they described some of the organs as being without damage, almost as if they were dissected out of the body. The Byford Dolphin incident wasn't the first nor the last fatal accident that rig would see. In 1976, just 3 years after its launch, the Byford Dolphin ran aground during transit from the Frigg oil fields in the North Sea to the port of Bergen. All crew members were evacuated into lifeboats, however, because the rough seas at the time, 6 people died after falling off of these lifeboats. In 2002, a Norwegian worker was also killed in an unspecified industrial accident on the rig. The worker was struck in the head fatally with a piece of metal. Because of the accident and the history of the rig, it was actually laid up in 2006, and it's beached currently in Turkey. I frequent the thalassophobia subreddit sometimes just to kind of see what they're talking about. I was able to find something that was kind of cool from a saturation diver. He had a couple of stories. It says, former saturation diver here, got some stories. Used to do saturation diving. I did work on oil rigs. It's pretty spooky down there. No particularly spooky, scary sea monster stories, but it's not a nice place. For one, it's dark as a motherfucker, pitch black, and your lamp barely goes more than a few yards effectively. The water is filled with particles, so it's kind of like shining your light into smoke. It's seriously like being in a void, and the only thing in this void is you and the rig. I never disconnected from it longer than I had to. It just feels like you can fall forever. As for spooky, scary sea monsters, I never really saw any. Don't get me wrong, you see a lot. The mixture you're breathing combined with pressure can and will really fuck with your senses. More than a few times I saw something big and fast moving just beyond my light. Sound doesn't travel well in water, but you can hear the rig popping and other shit. Always really deep tones. You see a bunch of really weird fucking fish though. No joke. Divers usually see a lot of fish that aren't identified. The aquanauts have to do that, but they can never get the funding to come down and see what we see, so we just live with aliens. We've named a few, but you don't really see them often, and rarely more than 2 or 3 times. Some fish are drawn to the lamp, but others just stay the fuck away from it. I think the most interesting thing is what the mixture in the depth does to your brain. When you've been out in the water for a while and literally only you and the piece of metal you're clinging to are the only things that seem to exist, your brain tries to fill that void. At least, I hope it was my brain doing that. The rig popping is really ominous because it's like a bass drum that's all around you, and the only sound almost in absolute silence. You can see things moving in the dark, and when you look at them, your lamp only goes 10 yards, so it's all hitting in those particles in the water. This happens a few times, and you're certain you're not alone down there. You feel like you're being hunted. A lot of guys die because they try to rush, and that's something you can't do underwater, no matter how much you want to. You kind of gotta just get it in your head, well shit, I hope it doesn't eat me, and keep working. It can be hard not to panic. They teach you tactical breathing both to conserve and to keep you from losing it. You start focusing really goddamn hard on that tactical breathing when you swear you saw something on the edge of your vision, felt the water move against your back, and heard the shift. Another story came to mind. I was out doing my job one time in absolute darkness of the void. I had been out for a good 30 or 45 minutes when I saw something swish over the top of my vision really fast. I looked around, couldn't see anything. It spooked me good, and so I was focused on my tactical breathing and not losing my fingers. A minute passed, and I saw something go a little behind the pylon and down. I was 100% sure it was a kraken or some shit. Another minute passes, and then this 2 or so foot long fish comes swimming up to me. Weird looking motherfucker, pale and long, skinny, with big eyes and a bigger mouth. It kind of just darted around me for a bit, just hanging out with me while I worked. When I was done, he took off. He was a cool fish. I told this story to a buddy of mine, and he suggested that the fish hung around me because of my light. A lot of things don't approach the light down here. He was probably using me for shelter from something bigger and meaner. How terrifying. On the topic of death, the pay was good, but the only place it could really get you was dead, eventually. I know of many people who died, and I personally knew 2. One panicked while he was working, as I understand, and fucked himself up. Getting hurt down there is a death sentence. You can't get back up in time to get patched up. My other buddy died because they fucked his mixture up. You can't put too much oxygen in the tank because it doesn't react well at depth. He went down, had a seizure due to it. Big investigation after that one. I think the closest I ever came to dying was when I was on an excursion, which is where you go to a different depth than the bell is at, and was about to come back up when I got tangled in my gear really bad. I lost track of it as I went back and forth around the pylons. Normally it's pretty easy to get out of, but it got caught under my helmet, which is bad for a variety of reasons. Also, when you're tangled and it's not taut, you can fall or rise without noticing. So basically, I had to carefully unweave myself without snapping any harnesses or locks while I fell into the bottomless abyss. It was actually pretty terrifying. tactical breathing at its finest. I obviously made it out okay. So from what I understand, the credentials for saturation diving is literally almost like the Marines. It's really hard to get into, it's really hard to get certified, but once you do, you make, like I said, a fuck ton of money. I don't think there's enough money in the world that would pay me to go down there on an oil rig in the middle of the fucking ocean. What do you think? Do you think you'd be able to saturation dive? Tell me in your comments below.